It's January 12th, 2012, and we're here at the Specialty Health offices with Dr. Tara Dall. Dr. Tara Dall is from Wisconsin. She's a full-time lipidologist. She's the president of the Midwest Lipid Association. I had a chance to hear Dr. Dall speak last night here in town, and her philosophy is just totally compatible with ours when it comes to the insulin-resistant patient and treatment philosophy. She's here to talk tonight specifically, not specifically, but with a focus towards women's health issues, and that's one of her real special interests. And so, is your practice pretty much totally women?
No, actually, it's 50%. 50% men, 50% women. But when I started out my life in primary care, I felt as though there was such a lack of education as far as cardiovascular disease in women, especially young women and children. There was nowhere to go. I mean, if you're a young woman and you want cardiovascular prevention, cardiologists don't see you until you've had a heart attack. And we just didn't really have a lot of places to send people for that kind of education. And I've been doing NMR lipo profiles for more than 12 years now. And so when I was in primary care practice, that's what I was doing. And in the process of doing it in every patient, I was realizing there were all these young women that I never would have expected would be at risk, who clearly had abnormalities there. And then when the board certification became available and an opportunity to really move my practice into a cardiometabolic lipid practice, I got very excited about that and taking that on as an area that was already an area of need. So, but what happened was I actually started out in the women's health department when I was first hired to start a lipid clinic, and then men started to come and they were embarrassed to go to the women's health clinic to get their lipids addressed. So we ended up moving a couple years later into more of an independent building that wasn't so focused on women's health, but certainly it's something that I have a great interest in. So.
That's just a perfect introduction. One of the things I thought we could do to get started, we've got some of our faithful supporters here in the audience. They might speak up later. I gave a presentation down in Las Vegas yesterday to the Highway Patrol, and you just led into the first part of it just perfectly. As part of that presentation, I tried to incorporate our philosophy, and I gave them a top 10 list, and the top 10 list is 10 important things you guys, the Highway Patrol, police, fire, that's our target audience. The top 10 things you guys and our outside experts have taught us. We've had an incredible run of experts come through, as you know. Mm-hmm. They're your friends. Tom Dayspring has been here, Bill Cromwell's been here, a whole group of the most generous lipidologists I've ever met. And so some of these thoughts are from them, but what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is just go over these 10 thoughts and just let you respond spontaneously about what you think about them.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Number one, it's not the passengers, it's the cars. We can attribute that to Bill Cromwell. We can attribute that to Finley Brown. We can attribute that to Michael Richmond. But that's the key saying. And we like sayings like that because our police officers and firefighters can grab a hold of that concept. LDLP, that's the number for me. In the insulin-resistant patient especially, LDLC, the routine cholesterol number, can be low and fool you. Don't get bagged. It's the particle number that we need, LDLP.
It could be a song.
It is that is the words. Those are the
Very
words
good.
to a song that we've got a poem. We can run the poem. We've got the particle poem. We can run that.
Just don't let me sing.
What is that thought?
So, you know, been on this bandwagon a long time. I mean, LDL particles drive atherosclerosis, and I use that same analogy, that the drivers, and regardless of how much cholesterol is being carried inside those particles, regardless of how many passengers are in the cars, if you have too many cars on the roadway, you get into an accident, you build plaque, you have trouble develop. And clearly that's the number that's been associated with risk. And all of the clinical trials now that have looked at this, that have compared routine LDL cholesterol measurements with LDL particles, hands down, every trial that's looked at this has shown that it's the LDL particles that drive the disease, not the cholesterol that's being carried. And we can be fooled, because you could have a patient with a very low cholesterol number and have very elevated particles, and those are the patients that become statistics in their 50s because we missed them. Because all those years, all we did were lipid panels, and we had no idea that they had excess number of particles. We raise our hands in the air when they're 52 and they have an event and their LDL was 70. When they come to my office after that event, I can tell you, I don't think in the last 7 years of my lipid practice I've ever seen a patient who'd had an event that didn't have an abnormal particle number in the setting of normal cholesterol. It just doesn't happen.
Do you ever use things like ping pong balls and marbles to illustrate some of these concepts?
Sure.
So here's one ping pong ball, and this is from Dr. Dayspring, this concept, and here's 16 marbles. What is this?
All right.
What do you think of when you see?
All right, so the way I illustrate it a little differently, but very similar. So we think about cholesterol could be packaged into these balls here. We're going to imagine that we fill them up with cholesterol, and actually each one of my hands is carrying the exact same amount of cholesterol. Obviously, the person that has these small, dense particles is at greater risk, because if we believe what we just said, that it's LDL particles that drive atherosclerosis, then obviously this patient is going to be at much greater risk than the patient that just has one large or only a few large particles. I sometimes illustrate this using cotton balls instead of a ping pong ball, and I put it actually into a cylinder and fill it up, and I label it cholesterol level, and they both go up to 100. And you can see obviously that the side that has the cotton balls has fewer particles, and obviously that patient's going to be at lower risk because they don't have as many LDL particles there. However, even if the particles are big like this, if you have too many of them, you're still at risk. So small, dense LDL, we know, keeps company with bad diseases like diabetes and insulin resistance, and it is our window into those diseases. When you've got small, dense LDL, you need to be thinking diabetes, you need to be thinking insulin resistance, and if you're not doing that, you're missing the mark. Also, if you have a lot of large particles, if they're in excess, you also have risks. We want to make sure that we understand that even if you have the more favorable large particles, if you have too many, you can still have disease develop. And the way I illustrate that with the cotton balls is I'll put them in a jar. You see there's not very many in there. But if I start smushing down those cotton balls and add more and add more and add more, all of a sudden it becomes a much denser situation. You have many, many more particles there, and that too can produce disease. So that's kind of my take on the marble particle story.